Good morning, folks. I'm Dan. We're working on the 701 project today. This is going to be part 2. I'm working on the Flaperons this morning. Flaperon skeletons. Part 1 of this, why I laid out the spars, the hinge angles, and the nose ribs on them. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay out and fit the rear ribs all the way down and start fitting the end ribs. And if this is something that's interesting to you, stay tuned. And hopefully we've got something that'll be helpful for you in your build. Layouts on the spar ribs, when you lay out the hinges, those are the layout points for the edges of the hinges, right down in here, this mark before you add the nose ribs. And there's where you get your spacing, and then of course I double checked them against the brackets on the wings. Then you mount the nose ribs. Everything else for the ribs lays out off the center line of the ribs, so it's just something worth taking note of to make sure and pay attention. And what I did for the ribs is you go ahead and mark your center lines on your nose ribs that you've installed. And these are all just, the nose ribs, well, everything's just clecoed in place at this point in time. And you don't want to rivet them in place until you've at least put the rear rib on these nose ribs. So I just lay out top and bottom, and then I'm going to extend that line on back onto the spar, both top and bottom. And that's where our ribs will lay out. All of the ribs, all of the rear ribs will face outboard from either wing, so they're facing, the open end is facing towards the tip of the wing, or the tip of the flaperons, and with the exception of one rear rib on each one, and it will match the nose rib on the front. So there's going to be one that faces the other way, and that's dictated by the nose rib you've already mounted. So this end will fit outward, and will fit in there just like that. And all the rest of the ribs will lay out facing outboard. That looks good right there. We can go ahead and remove our nose ribs. And then clamp them back in place so that we're centered up for the locations for our rib holes. These are all riveted in place with A4s. Once I lay them out. Good edge distance there. I'll rivet in place just like that. We do the same thing for the other end. Then I'll go ahead and lay out for the Rest of the rear ribs. One thing I would note as a scratch builder, I just showed that I line them up with my front rib, and that's the way I clamp the rear ribs in place to match that nose rib. We're supposed to run a center line down through the flange and then line that up through our already drilled holes, which we've already got in the front of this spar to match the nose rib holes to go in. I do still center line those, but I also find that it's really better for me to also line them up with the nose rib if I've got that rib in position. That way, if I've got a different size flange, you know, if I've got a little more flange on the front of these where it attaches to the rib as opposed to the flange that's going down the back, I want to figure out the best position for that so I still have a good center line going right down off the center of that rib when I go to attach my skins top and bottom. So I do put a center line on there, but I also think it's important as a scratch builder to go ahead and align it with the ribs you've already got in place or whatever assembly you've already got put together so that they match up. Otherwise you can end up with a set of ribs going, or your ribs riveting on in one position and having good hole distance, and then you try and line that up with the center line of your flange and you're off there. So I want to make sure that I take into account both of those before I actually start drilling holes and riveting them. 2 nose ribs on each spar are clecoed in place. The rear ribs that match those 2 spars are clecoed in place. I was going to rivet them, but I think I'll wait until later. That way it'll be a little bit easier to deburr everything when I put the skins on and stuff. So for right now, I'm just going to leave them clecoed in place. I'm going to go ahead and lay out the spacing for the rest of the rear ribs. Okay, so if we work from this end, and we'll use center lines on this set of ribs now is where we measure all the rest of our ribs. This will be right inboard, so this will be the cabin end. So from this rib, the first one is 258, then 260. Should have 192 to the outside. 192, okay, that'll come out right. And we just want to verify those one more time. Right. Steve. 300. 398. Okay, that looks good. So then I just run those lines all the way around. Okay, and there again, all our rib openings face outward, except for this one to match the nose rib. So we'll use these. actually have one more rib, and it sits right there. 162. Center line of that. I just marked the spacing on my square itself of where I want the center lines of those holes to be, so they're all consistent. Now I can go ahead and pre-drill those, put my ribs in the back, line up center lines on them. I can line up those center lines, clamp it in place. Go ahead and clamp it in place right there. Getting a little wore out on this clamp here. It was a wore out clamp when I got it, and I've used and abused it quite a bit. I've got some newer clamps of these, but I don't like the offset as well as I like this. This is offset from one side, so I can go in the back and clamp it in place, and I think it does a little bit better job. Line up your holes, check your spacing, top and bottom. I think we'll move that just a little bit. there's the next bar ready to go. Except for the ends on them. Only thing really to watch out for is make sure you get the proper rib in the proper position, because they are directional, lefts and rights. And don't accidentally turn them upside down or anything foolish like that. If you find these videos helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Leave any comments you've got for me, and give me a thumbs up if you like them. Thanks for taking the time to watch.